Hello, welcome back to the Arturia Jupiter 8 video series. Today we're dealing with the sequencer. This is not to be confused with the Arpeggiator, which is part of the original synth design, and we've already dealt with that. This is an add-on. And whilst it has some great functionality in there, and I'm going to sing its praises in some regards, there is one absolutely howling mistake that Arturia have made with this interface, and we'll get to that later. So it's a sequencer. You can see it's got 32 potential steps in it, and you can also see this red box up here which limits how many steps we actually have. If you click your mouse anywhere in this box, then you generally tend to see it kind of disappear off wildly. I don't know what criteria are used to determine where this box goes. Can you see where my mouse is in order to control how many steps there are? Just kind of click in it and then figure out by moving your mouse left or right what you need to do. Bit of an odd one. Okay, so let's start out at the beginning. We have a sound. I press a key and we hear a sound. Nothing else happens. In order to engage the sequencer, let's put it in note on mode, which now means that every time I press a key, that red strobing light is going to stream across. Every time I press a new key, it's going to start back at 1 again. So it's now playing each one of these 8 segments in sequence, and the sequence that it's choosing is based in 16th steps, and it's going forwards. If I slow that down to 8th steps, it's now going to travel forwards at half the speed. If I set it to backwards, it's going to go backwards at that speed. But it's not doing anything at the moment, it's just a pretty light show. Let's make it connect to something. Well, we have 3 output destinations that the sequencer can be attached to, and the most traditional thing that people associate sequencers with is by playing different notes. In other words, we're going to control the pitch. This is where things are going to go kind of horribly wrong. The first thing that I need to tell you to do with pitch controls and this sequencer generally is that it's modelled on the concept of control voltages. It uses a digital 0 to 1 range, and you can see that here, go all the way up to 1 and all the way down to 0. And if you double click on it, it resets it back to 0.5, which is the midpoint. But that range is basically, it's mapping to the equivalent of a control voltage. Because it's a digital range, a purely linear digital range, it's really difficult to make the sequencer understand that that wants to be pitches. And so we have this button over here, which when we click it, quantizes the steps of that sequencer. And so now when we increase or decrease this bar, it's going to output quantized control voltage signals to, or in this case, the VCO1 pitch. Herein lies the problem. When you're dragging this thing up and down, you still only see digital numbers. You don't see the semitone offsets that are going to be represented by that number. I can't see anywhere in the documentation or in any help system anywhere how you easily translate that number into a pitch. In fact, I've done it myself. So here we have, I mean, how thoroughly miserable is that? We now have a set of numbers. I've derived these all manually just by clicking on different ranges and finding out where the semitone numbers are. So if I want to create a pitch 5 semitones above the root, I need to pick somewhere between this numerical range here. So if I pick 0.6, it's going to play a note 5 semitones above the pitch. Let's do that. In fact, I'll set the basic one, the first note at 0 and the second one at 0.6. So now that's going to play 2 notes. If I press a C on the keyboard, it's going to play a C and an F. And let's make the range just 2. So if I just turn the sequencer off for a moment, there's my C, there's my F. Slow it down a bit, turn the sequencer back on. Let's make it a 4-step sequence. And the 4th note will have we'll have it play a G. So I'll go back over to my text file. I kid you not, 7 semitones is 0.64. Okay. So I'm very sorry to bring that bad news to you. If you want to use this sequencer to generate note offsets, then you're going to need something like this. I'll actually paste this entire list of numbers into the description for this YouTube video, so just feel free to copy it and paste it, put it in Excel or Word or whatever you want. The ones that you're most going to be interested in are the 0 at 0.5, and then your octave bounce is at 0.75. So it's basically it's a purely linear graph following 4 octaves. So the highest control voltage up at the top is 2 octaves above. Let's make this even bigger. So if I set this note up here at +1, that's going to be 2 octaves higher than my root C. And this note down here at -1 will be 2 octaves below. If I disable this quantize feature, you see this ring light goes out, indicating that it's no longer basically fixed. I get to choose an amount of modulation that's going to be applied. If I choose 0.5, that's exactly the same as if it was quantized. Turn it quantized again. Okay, which means that at its absolute limit, all the way up at 1, let's try and catch that second note. Turn it off. Let's go 10 semitones. That's the note. So it's twice the range. The absolute limit of this sequencer's control voltage modulations are basically plus and minus 4 octaves in control voltage terms. And we can have any division thereof. Now that's not very useful when you're dealing with pitch, but it's great when we want to come to deal with stuff like filter values that can be non-quantized and a far more organic kind of sound. So I completely understand the desire to decouple the quantized nature of modulation settings. That's common in many synthesizers, but when in quantized mode, to not give you a visual representation of what your semitone based quantized offsets are, I don't understand that at all. When we're drawing in our graphical interface, if I click and drag, then it basically follows my mouse. So it's really easy to draw organic shapes using this thing. If I choose the line tool, it does exactly that. I choose delete, it just erases any of the bars I click on. Even though you can see that even though I'm kind of drawing stuff over here, it's never going to get to them at the moment because it's an 8-step sequence. If you click the X at the bottom, it just deletes everything. And this generates a load of random patterns. Every time you click it, it generates a new random pattern. So that's really interesting, again, just as a give me some interesting things to play with, give me some modulation options, and I'll press a key and see which one sounds good, and then you might just stumble across something that sounds awesome. So let's get this thing ticking along again. Okay, that's interesting. Let's stick with that one. So we found our sequence that we say, right, well, that's going to be the basis of what I want to start with. And you think, right, well, I don't particularly like that note there. Let's just double click that one, take it away. Maybe that one. And that's what we're going to use as a kind of base to start from. At the moment that's synced to the host, doesn't have to be. Turn sync off, and now I've got complete manual control over the speed. If I click stop, I just disengage the sequencer completely. Doesn't matter what's in here, none of it will get used. If I press start, the sequencer is going to run in the background, and now when I play a note, it'll just pick up from wherever I'm playing at. And then from that point onwards it catches up again. But every time I play a new note, it doesn't matter, it doesn't care that I'm playing notes on the keyboard, it's doing its own sweet thing. MIDI start takes external MIDI signals from other equipment. I don't have any other equipment, but if you've got like a drum machine, you can plug your drum machine into your DAW, take MIDI start and generate your signals that way, but I can't demo it, so I'm not going to talk about something that I don't use. Let's have a look at this link line under here. So I've slowed the sequencer right down, so it's really playing very slowly now, and I've given some attack to the envelope. So now it's going to take 200 milliseconds to play a note. But note, after I play the key, from that point onwards the sequence doesn't have an envelope anymore. It's playing the note immediately at its sustain level. So it basically disengages the triggering of the envelope on each of the notes. Once it's up and running, once you've pressed the note and the envelope has done whatever it's going to do, it doesn't re-trigger unless we tell it to. Now it's going to re-trigger on every single one of those steps, and you'll hear the attack, the pulsing attack, the 200 millisecond attack of each note. Now if I link each of these 4 notes together, you're going to get an envelope trigger, an envelope trigger, an envelope trigger, and then no envelope trigger over this period of time. So those notes will be played without the attack envelope. And then it goes back to the envelope. So basically you can connect sections of the sequencer together to say, suspend basically the envelope triggering during this period of time, but by default, if you've got none of these link options set, it's going to re-trigger every single time. So let's leave it like that for now. Glide allows us to apply a portamento effect to some of the notes. So let's do it there. Now as things stand at the moment, you're not going to hear it, because I haven't introduced the glider mount. So this is independent from the onboard portamento of the Jupiter 8. This is the sequencer's own internal glide setting. So let's give it some of that. I'll speed it up a bit. Okay, got a new sequence now. Swing literally applies swing to the sequence. Hear them kind of basically go out of time as the swing is introduced. I tend to find that swing only really works very well at very low numbers. It tends to become overwhelming very quickly. Accent allows us to apply our own independent low pass filter cutoff spikes, basically shots, envelope hits on individual notes. So if I choose some of these randomly, we've got this, the accent settings are up here. So what it's doing on each of those 4 notes is it's basically giving the cutoff an additional bump using this attack and decay envelope. Connect some of this stuff together. Pretty cool. So I thought rather than make you endure my random monstrosity of a sequence anymore, I'd actually pick one of the stock sounds so that I can show you some of the different effects that you can get from the sequencer and how, you know, it can sound better than just some random, like, massive notes thrown together. So this is the sound. And that's 2 sequencers. This is a dual mode sound, so we've got this sequence going in the low panel and this sequence in the upper panel. So if I just silence the upper panel for a moment and go back to the other one. So we've got VCO1 being mapped here, VCO2 being mapped down here. Those 2 mixed together. Now there's actually a sharp kind of stab. You might be fooled into thinking it's this accent note. It isn't. There's a sawtooth LFO operating in the background. I'll just pull that away and then we'll lose that really intense spike. And now you can hear the accent more clearly. There it is. So you can hear with those 2 notes being linked together, you get it's no longer re-triggering every envelope note. Those 2 notes are basically being merged together. So that's what's going on the lower side. On the just mute that. On the upper side, we've got this fella. So we've got the high pass filter cutoff, which is a non-quantized value. I'll just take that away for a moment. So there's with the HPF applied. Okay, that's a good example of a non-quantized value. Then we've got pitch, which is a quantized value. And then VCF cutoff, which is at maximum. tiny little sound. So each time the notes are linked, it basically, the envelope is gone, is done, and there's no sustain level. So if I link all of those notes together, we don't hear anything. We only hear the first note. That's really cool. So just bear in mind when we come to do our preset deep dives, or when you're working with the synth generally, these modules do apply to both panels independently. And here is an excellent example of two completely independent sequencers running simultaneously. So when you're trying to deconstruct a sound, you need to remember if it's dual mode or split mode, that you've got these two completely separate sequencers that you need to deal with. In terms of the output options available to us, they're exactly the same as the Galaxy module: pitch, pulse width, 2 cutoffs, resonance, and amplitude. So these sequencers try to think of them in terms of control voltages rather than notes, and these are now modulations that can be applied anywhere. So you could basically make like a makeshift tremolo by doing this kind of business. And outputting that to the VCA. I figured rather than just talking about it, I'd do it. That just kind of made this up off the top of my head. So I just went back to my default setting, drew the 8 bars exactly as I'd previously done. I've actually linked all of them together with a bit of glide and output it to the VCA. You got your little tremolo. So that's the sequencer covered. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please consider subscribing, hit notifications, then you find out when the next episode comes out. Hope to see you then. Thanks a lot.